Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you how to turn a photo like this into something like this. So this is essentially a tutorial about how I change my twilight / late evening photos into night photos.
So first off, we're going to start with a crop. So I'll crop this into a 3:2 ratio to begin with, and just going to get that aircraft centered like so, and yeah, that's good. Now we're going to put it straight into a denoise just to remove all the grain from shooting at a high ISO. For this particular photo, I'm going to be probably just using denoise 100 because it looks pretty good, and some of the settings that we're going to be editing are going to affect the amount of grain that gets added, such as sharpness and also texture and contrast. Okay, so now that that's denoised, what we're going to want to do, because we're turning this into a night shots are usually quite cool coloured, and we want to get rid of all of this orange from the sun disappearing below the horizon. So what I'm going to do is scroll up to my colour section, get the oranges, drop them completely, get the yellows, drop them completely. And that alone turns it into the colour scheme we kind of want for the night. And now the reds have been slightly affected by the colour being turned off. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to the red and we're going to change the hue of the reds as well as the saturation to adjust for that change. So it's a little bit less drastic like so. Okay, from here, you'll already notice that we've got heaps of red, like colour bleeding. We're going to deal with that later, but for now, we'll just get our settings ready before we start masking. So there's a little bit of chromatic aberration here. So we're going to remove chromatic aberration there. Hasn't done all that great of a job, but that's okay because it's pretty minor. And another thing we're going to do back in the colour section is, depending on what part of the world you shoot in or what airport you're at, there'll be grass below the aircraft, so it might also have a yellow tinge as well as like an orange or yellow. So what you want to do is we're going to drop the greens as well. Also these teals / like aqua colour. And then for the blues, just to help with the night sky editing, we're going to drop the saturation as well as the luminance a little bit, just to kind of get that night sky look going. And we're also going to get rid of the purples as well. So the purples up here, see how if you exaggerate it a lot, you'll see that they're affecting the shot there. So because of the kind of colours that we've got in this aircraft, we can just drop those completely, as well as these lighter kind of violet colours. All right, let's move on. So we'll go to the global just editing settings here. With your colour profile, different things will look better than others. For me, I personally just like to keep it in camera standard, which represents the exact look of the shot straight out of the camera, so I can adjust all the colours and all of the contrast and stuff from there. I may well change it later on in the editing process, but for now, this suits me well. Okay, so from here, we're just going to increase the brightness of the exposure by a little bit, increase the contrast by a fair bit, increase our highlights as well, and also our shadows by a little bit. We're just focusing on getting the actual subject reasonably well exposed before we really touch the background, because the background's going to be almost completely dark anyway, so it won't really have a huge effect. We can do the same with our whites here. We can just drag them up until the aircraft is nice and bright. And our blacks, well, we like to have a bit of contrast on our night shots because, well, if you're trying to make it look like a good fake night shot, you're going to want the underbelly to be reasonably dark, which will also touch up in masking, but we just wanted to make it look as natural as possible. There's no real need to touch the S-curve or the curve in this particular photo, so I'm just going to leave that be. Look, the white balance, in this case, I'm going to drop it down. I think most night shots, the sweet spot for making it look nice is between 4,000 and 3,000. It gets rid of a nice level of the yellowy tinge from warmer colors at like late twilight sunset. So I think that looks pretty good there at 3,600. Vibrance, saturation, don't really need to touch those. They're all looking fine. And then we'll come down to these settings. So texture and clarity can make or break a photo. It looks pretty nice if you just slam it up to 100, but in this case, we're not going to do that. We're going to touch that a little bit later on. So I'm going to put it to about 15 now on the texture, and the clarity as well. Really good for editing night shots. Works in your favor a lot, but to prevent any halos, we're just going to put it on 5. And with our dehaze, so some of you who are more familiar with night shots may know about a reverse dehaze setting. I don't really know much about using it, but on my night photos, I usually like to drop it just down by a little bit to remove some of the contrast added from clarity and texture. So I'm putting it on -5 in this case. Vignette, we'll come back to vignetting later on, and now we'll move on to sharpening. So some of you also may use topaz after you've finished, or even before you've started editing. I usually use it after I finish on my photos, but with sharp night photos like this, honestly, there's not a real need for them. So I'll just show you what I use for my sharpening settings inside of Lightroom. I usually put my sharpness to about 80. It actually seems to be rather extreme on this. So I'm going to put it to around 50 here. And I'm going to drop my radius. My camera, for some reason, puts the radius up to 2 automatically, but I usually keep it at about 1.2. And then my masking, just slam it to 20. So it sharpens the edges a little bit. Okay, so here, you could call this, even if it was just a twilight shot, you could post that if you don't want to turn it into like a night photo looking shot there. So that could be your finished edit, but in this case, I'm going to show you what I do in my masking, etc. First off, these little weird things, don't know what they are, there's 2 of them. Honestly, looks like a shooting star to me, so I'm just going to remove both of those because you won't see them anyway, but just in case they mess with the masks, I'm going to remove them. All right. I was tinkering around before here in the masking section. What you want to do is create a sky mask to start. We're going to get the fake night look going now rather than later on, just so we know what we're working with. So pretty much straight away, we're going to drop the exposure down almost as low as it can go. And we're going to search for any issues where the AI has messed up the masking. So I'm going to ask it to show the overlay here. Now, you may get a little bit nervous because you'll notice that the mask is bleeding onto the parts of the aircraft. In my opinion, that really sells the look because you don't want the aircraft to be 100% bright if it's going to be like a fake night photo. So the fact that it darkens parts of the aircraft is more realistic than not. So that's pretty good there. And you'll also now notice there's a bit of blue left over here from the twilight lighting from the sun. So we're going to get the brush tool and we're going to brush over all of the bits that are red and that are blue and that just aren't the colors that you want in the photo. The aircraft, if it's white, you almost want it to be pure white by the time you finish this step. So any bits that are reflecting blue from the sunlight, you just want to get rid of, or also red, like up here on the fuselage. You can get more precise with it later on, but you just want to get a rough job of where these colors need to get removed from. So check the engines and the fuselage near where lights reflect, and also the underbelly. That's where like the most reflective part of the aircraft is. So you just want to make sure you get that. Any reflections really. There as well. Don't have to be particularly meticulous with this. You can just kind of do a rough job and cover all the bits that have the color. And that's pretty much what I'm going to do there. And now, well, what you want to do is then subtract the sky, because over here I've hit the sky. Hasn't done a fantastic job there, but you just minus that, and then go down to the saturation and simply drop it all the way down. And then in the wider scheme of things, you'll notice where all of that saturation was, it's now nice and white. And so I've got the Australian flag here, which I do want to be a little bit saturated. So we're going to create a new mask with an object and just get that flag and saturate it. And there we go. So now what we're going to do is with that dark sky mask, I don't know if any of you may have noticed before, even these fine little bits here where the mask is missed, you want to go over them. You want to make sure that this part is done with extra, like, perfectionist. You want to make sure, even if it gets parts of the engines and stuff, it's good, there's reflections. Make sure you get in all of the nooks and crannies and the mask is complete. You're going to have to use your eyes without just the AI masking tool, because sometimes it just doesn't show where it's missed. So you check in all these little bits here, you can just go over it if you're not 100% sure. And there you go, that's another bit that needed darkening, and all in these engine wing parts there. And then up in here, hotspots are basically just triangular kind of shaped corners. You want to always search those because that's where the masking usually messes up and you have to go over by hand. Or just a gap between the wings and fuselage where the sky isn't like predominantly there. Always check in there. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay. So from here, I mean, it looks all right, but it looks off because you can see here, this part that would be quite shadowed in the night time is very visible. So this is where I use gradients to fix that. So what we're going to do, we're going to jump back into the masking section. And we're going to use a mix of linear and radial gradients to almost create a little mini vignette around the whole aircraft. So you just want to lightly touch the edges of each bit here of the aircraft, just so they get somewhat darkened by these masks. Okay, so now what we're going to want to do, we're going to grab our exposure, we're going to drop that just slightly, but mainly we're going to drop our highlights, drop our shadows as well, and also our whites, just to make it look a little bit more natural and just darken those little bits. So now we've done a pretty good job there. It looks nice. It's darkened it to make it look a little bit more natural, but the sky has become quite dark now, like almost a little bit too extreme. So we're just going to lighten that just a little bit. That's pretty good with the background mask there. So we're almost finished with the background, and now we're going to create a subject mask. This is where we're going to work on getting the aircraft looking like how it would in a night shot. So we're going to increase our contrast just a little bit, increase our highlights as well there, make it look nice and bright. And then we're going to also increase our shadows, just to make those wings a little bit brighter. And this is where I'm going to minus this tail area here, because I want that to stay dark and not get affected by the shadow adjustment there. As well as this wingtip there, I'm going to get rid of that. And we're going to focus a little bit more on that shortly. And now what we're going to want to do is, in our subject mask, we're going to want to come down to the texture and clarity section. So as I was saying before, when you do it on the whole aircraft, it can affect the background as well, it can make a halo. So here you could just go berserk and put it to 100. I'm just going to put it down to about 50 there to make a nice bit of shine come through and not overdo it 100%. And then we've got our clarity slider here, which is another great tool to use for making it look a little bit more like it's in the night. So I'm going to put this to about 33 there. And dehaze again, you can drop it down. I'm going to put it actually down to about there, minus 14, as it keeps this area nice and bright-ish and the rest of the aircraft a little bit more white. Okay, I've also just noticed here, as you edit it more, you'll notice the mistakes you make with the sky mask and what the AI has done wrong. So what you can do is you can just come down and keep brushing over that until the bluey black disappears, the dark navy disappears. because you really don't want that shining through in your photo because it exposes that it's not really taken in the night. So this is where you got to be a perfectionist. There you go, hide the wheel if you have to. You just got to make sure it looks really, really, really pristine. Okay, coming up to maybe the make or break part of this. You want to get a brush and you want to go over all of the bottom half of the plane, just very lightly, just touching the plane. Over here on the wings as well here, on the engine, and up here on the underbelly. And then we're going to minus the sky from that. So it's just touching those little underbits there. We're going to drop down our whites completely. We're also going to drop our highlights completely. And we're just going to drop the exposure by a very minor bit, just to make it more blending into that sky. And look, we're almost done now with the edit. It's looking pretty good there. I'm just going to adjust the crop slightly, lifting that plane up. And already, if you look at the before and after, it looks pretty authentic for a night shot. So I'm just going to go through some very, very minor adjustments from here. I've been noticing here up on the roof, it is rather blue. So I'm going to jump in to here and I'm going to drop down the saturation of these blues by even more, probably to about minus 50 there. That also makes the night sky look nice and dark like that. And so now I'm just going to go back into our sky mask, because when we've dropped the saturation it's gone dark again. I'm going to increase the brightness just a little bit to make the outskirts of the plane look a bit brighter. And right about now we're about done. And so I'm going to go over some optional stuff now to make it look a little bit better, in my opinion. I wanted to go through some stuff in Photoshop on how to make these lights look nice and bright, all of these lights that are on here, as well as this very miniature back strobe. I've gone over this in a previous tutorial, but I'll just do it again because this has different colored lights. So what we're going to want to do is take this into Photoshop. And while that's loading, we can go into Google Chrome and just type in white lens flare. So there's a couple of different options, but you just got to make sure that it has a black background, whichever one you choose. So this is a pretty good one. I'll just take that one for now. Copy image. And we just do a Command-C, Command-V into here. You go into this area, and then you go to screen. It's got a bit of a white halo around it in this box. So what you want to do is you want to get a very soft eraser and just brush around the edges so it disappears a little bit. Now, we're going to slap this onto any lights that we find. So like there, on the wing there, the landing light, we're just going to slap it right there. And then rotate it a little bit downwards. I always like to have the starburst coming out the side here rotated downwards. I think it just looks more natural, because when you do get it naturally from the camera, it looks usually like it's angled downwards. So I'm just going to do that there. And then I'm going to copy and paste this onto all of the white lights that are on the plane here. So you just got to keep making sure you remove these little bits. I've just noticed there's a corner up here that I haven't got there. And finally, we've got the mini strobe at the back. This one will be quite a small one. And we've got a bit of light there to remove. And there we go. Now, the final thing that I'm just going to touch up here is the red wing light here. When you're messing with the colors, a lot of the time it can have a bit of a toll on the look of that. If you look there, it doesn't look great. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back in here, red lens flare, and then go to overlay. These are a lot harder to find a good one for. It's actually quite difficult. Never really been able to find a great one, but this one that I found recently is quite good from Shutterstock. So we're going to copy that and do the exact same thing we did with the white one and go to screen. Just put that on top. Now I know it's a little bit orange for a beacon, but the shape is rather good, as well as a little spillage from the side. So we're just gonna put that there, and then subtract these little bits like so. All right, so we're done there. That looks pretty nice. We've put some lights there to just make them look a little bit brighter like it's nighttime. And we're going to save this with no image compression, and just like that, click OK. And once that's done, we can close down Photoshop. This is a previous edit that I was doing. And we can come back into Lightroom, and it will import it. If you see number 3 here, it'll import it straight back in. And we've got our lens flare there, which we're going to fix up now. Just going to put a rough brush mask there. We're going to saturate it, saturate it nicely, and then we're going to colorize it. With the colorize, you just put it on red, and we're back to normal. Now the only final thing I noticed was obviously a mask up here messed with this little bit of writing. It's moved all of its whites. So I'm just going to increase the whites there and also get rid of the blacks. And that there is pretty much finished. I mean, not much went wrong with the AI masking, and it's a reasonably sharp photo. So I'm just going to do one minor adjustment. I still think this wing is too bright, so I'm going to get a brush tool, really just paint over it, subtract the sky, get rid of the highlights, get rid of the whites, highlights. The sky doesn't seem to have subtracted very well from it. Down those as well. Just going to show the overlay here. Subtract to the sky. No, it's not working. I'll just do it myself. Yeah, and then drop the exposure of tints a bit more. And I'm happy with that. So that is, overall, we went from this to this, which I think is pretty impressive. And actually, no, one more thing I'll do. With this tail here, we'll go into the reds, and we'll just increase that and drop the luminance just a little bit to bring out those rich red tones in the tail. And I think I've just overdone that little edit that I did up there before, so I'm going to put the, oh no, wrong one. Put this exposure down just a little bit. And that's it. So I won't run through my export settings and upload settings for this one. It's just going to be an edit tutorial. But if you have any questions, put them in the comments or shoot me a DM on Instagram, and I'll see what I can do to answer them. But yeah, that is the before and the after, and I think it's turned out pretty well. Thank you.
Don't leave.